So as a campaign, we've been working on the issue of unconventional oil and gas for about, well, for up to 3 years August now. It works differently. The way these licences are sold is very different in Great Britain to how it is in Northern Ireland and Ireland. All these red areas you can see here, they're known as PEDAL licences, so Petroleum Exploration and Development licences. In Northern Ireland they're known as just a petroleum licence, but in Great Britain they're sold in rounds, and all these ones in red were sold 5.5 years ago to companies looking to go after onshore oil and gas. So the big chunk of those licences were sold to companies that want to go after unconventional oil and gas, so that's your fracking and the stuff that you guys are probably most concerned about here. This next licensing round is going to cover all of this area in orange. It's roughly 60% of Great Britain. Consultation to sell off that area ended March this year. So we're expecting that licensing round to start any time now, basically from now, or maybe a couple of months from now. If we zoom in to Ireland, there are licences. Like I said, it's not done in rounds like it's done in Great Britain. It's done in a much more piecemeal manner. It's basically, if a company's keen on an area, will enter into negotiations and they can pretty much have it. If there's more than one company after it, it's done on a first come, first served basis. So the companies in Ireland are Infrastrata up here, Rathlin Energy. Here, Tamboran, as you guys probably know all too well, and down here it's a company called Enniskillen Oil. That's energy with an I. I don't know how it's pronounced, but Enniskillen. Yes, so this is basically a screenshot taken from an interactive map that's on our website. And if you zoomed out so you can see the entirety of the UK and Ireland, you see lots of these. So this Discovering Crossbones represents a planning application. And across the whole of the UK there's about 100 of them, 100 planning applications at various stages of completion. And it's not just shale. There are a couple of coal-based unconventional gas technologies which are coming at us pretty much in exactly the same way that shale is. And we're going to talk about them later, and it's definitely worth paying attention because there are communities just like yourselves in Great Britain that are facing not shale but this coal-based unconventional gas technology, and they're basically identical. All the stuff you hear about what's going on in Australia, that's all this coal, what we call coal bed means saying what they call coal seam gas, so it's definitely worth getting your head around that stuff. The other thing to mention is, though, like I say, if you zoomed out on the map you'd see about 100 of these things. They're all for exploratory drilling at this stage. So though it looks really intimidating, we're relatively early on in the game, and to really know what this industry looks like in production, you've got to go and look at the countries where they've been operating. So the US, Australia and Canada really. So we're going to show you a really short 5-minute film from Australia. It's taken from a larger film. It's based in Queensland, where they drilled 5,000 of these unconventional gas wells. Yeah. And then we'll crack on with Ed's presentation and hopefully some question and answers.
I think as a whole, this community naively felt that this area is so special and so important as an agricultural resource. There's no way in the world that they'll ever be mining here. Like, it's just stupid.
The first easement they want to put through our place was diagonally past the front of our house. They only tell you the good part about it until they start, and then you find out that there's pipelines going north, south, east and west, and wherever they feel fit to go.
And representatives of the gas companies, you know when they're lying because their lips are moving. It's all about getting their company onto your property to extract the resource, often at your property's detriment.
Unconventional forms of gas, such as coal seam gas, shale gas and tight gas, differ from natural gas because they're more difficult to extract and can't be developed with conventional processes. Unconventional gas production is highly invasive above and below ground, requiring massive numbers of wells and intrusive extraction methods, such as horizontal drilling and hydraulic fracturing.
this industrialises your region. So your whole region turns into a factory, a gas factory.
It is not an industry that has a light environmental footprint, despite all the lies their spin doctors go on with and the massive advertising campaigns that they've engaged in, saying that they're clean and green. They're not.
This is my land. It's also one of Australia's biggest coal seam gas reserves. Santos are currently running ads designed to induce, in those who see them, a sense of feeling that this is all pretty mundane, straightforward, very safe. Well, they don't tell you what the ads should tell us. They're frightened to show us a map of the gas wells and what they look like. They're frightened to show us a map of the all-weather roads that we needed to service the gas wells. They're frightened to show us a map of the topsoil, which will need to be removed for pipe construction to connect the gas wells. They're frightened to tell us where the employees will go because they'll have recreational needs and they'll need to be administrative quarters. They're frightened to tell us that these coal seam gas initiatives will become large industrial estates. They don't tell us any of this. They will require many, many hectares. Santos don't tell us how many compressors they will need. They don't tell us what they'll do with the gas or the water. They don't tell us once the water is treated where you'll store it because the volumes will be greater than several Sydney harbours. They don't tell us where they'll put the residue. They don't tell us where the salt will go or what it will do to the soil. They don't tell us that it's a 24/7 operation. In other words, they don't tell us what a fully blown gas field looks like.
Right, so I'm first going to sort of dive into a bit of like what's been happening around the world. As we've heard, it's mainly the US, Canada and Australia where this has happened. You're looking at, you know, basically these are these frack pads that we've been popping up all over these countries. And we're not talking about small numbers, we're talking about maybe like 100,000 so far in the US, about 20,000 in Canada, as we heard, about 5,000 so far in Queensland in Australia. But that's just the sort of beginning of this process. If it's allowed to continue, they're talking about, you know, potentially up to a million like of these wells in the US alone. And it's not just the numbers, it's the sort of like nature of this, how it sort of coats the landscape. So if we zoom in on just one county in Pennsylvania, this is Washington County, zoom in a little chunk of landscape, you've got like pad, 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 a place where a pad is scheduled to go, you know, another, zoom in on another little bit of countryside in this same county, you know, it's pad, 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 gas processing plant, compressor station, a pond for the wastewater, another bit of the same county, pad, pad, right next to a school. You know, you're beginning to get the picture. This is just like squared across the whole landscape. This is quite interesting. This is a different county, but again in Pennsylvania. This is Bradford County, right up next to the border with New York. The local government's gone to a lot of trouble to document what's happened in this one county. So you can go to the Bradford County website and there's loads of maps and animations and things like this. And this is just showing 4 years from 2008 to 2012 and 2,000 shale gas wells go into this one county that's roughly the size of a county over here. So why do they need to do this? Why do they need to plonk all this infrastructure like, right in the middle of these communities? So it's all about the difference between conventional and unconventional oil and gas. So this is your sort of conventional oil and gas that we've been used to for the last 100 years or more. And it's in some sort of permeable rock that it can flow through, like sandstone usually. But it's got something over the top sealing it in so it can't get out to the surface. But if you drill down through that into your pocket of oil or gas, then it can all flow fairly easily to the well and out to the surface. And it's relatively easy to extract. Of course, the issue is that once you start, using up all this conventional resources, then you're what you're left with is these unconventional resources that are trapped in much more impermeable rocks like shale or coal in the case of coal bed methane. And that they're much harder to get the gas or oil out of. You've usually got to drill horizontally through these layers and then potentially crack the rock as well to get the gas out. So this is where this process of hydraulic fracturing comes in. So the general idea is to drill down to the layer you're trying to target, then usually horizontally through that layer for quite a distance. The sort of longest horizontals in Pennsylvania now are about 2 kilometres long, so getting towards 1.5 miles. And then the idea is to like pump in millions of gallons of water, sand and chemicals under massive pressure, so you'll have a whole array of frac pumps on the surface, these huge pumps. You're maybe talking about 40,000 horsepower of pumps. So, that's the equivalent of about 80 Ferraris running flat out to pump this fluid down. And the idea is to carry the sand that's in the fluid into the cracks in the rock, force the cracks open, push the sand in, leave the sand in the cracks, holding the cracks open, and then you suck all your fluid back out to the surface again, where it then becomes a waste that you're trying to then get rid of. And that's where these big ponds that you'll see in the States come in to store all this waste, which can potentially, it's got chemicals in it you put down there, but it can also be leaching various materials, even radioactive materials, out of the shale layer and bringing them up to the surface as well. So this is the sort of overall picture. There's sort of much higher intensity. So your conventional oil and gas that we've known for 100 years is small numbers of wells, and the oil and gas flows through the rock to the well and up to the surface. Unconventional oil and gas, your fracking is lots and lots of wells going down and then coating your layer of rock underground. So like if you want to get gas from here, you've got to drill to there. If you want to get gas from here, you've got to drill down to there. So that there's lots of wells covering your rock layer under the surface. But that then means lots of pads on the surface to drill all the wells, and then associated infrastructure, pipelines and all sorts of things. So that's why you end up with landscapes like this with pad going off into the distance, because you're also covering the subsurface with these wells. Coal bed methane, very similar. If you don't want to think about it too hard, just think that coal bed methane is identical to shale gas. There are subtle differences down underground. Probably most important is that these coal seams tend to be a lot nearer the surface. The ones that are being targeted, they tend to be flooded with water. So an extra part of the whole coal bed methane extraction process is this so-called dewatering of the coal seams, where they pump millions of gallons of water out of the coal seams to basically clear the water out of these cracks in the coal to let the gas flow to the surface. And this water that's in the coal seams is potentially been sort of marinating in coal for a long time, potentially up to hundreds of years, and therefore has picked up lots of contaminants from the coal. So it gets to the surface, it could be up to 5 times more salty than seawater, and it doesn't just have to be sodium chloride, it can be all sorts of heavy metal salts, things like cadmium and arsenic, and even radioactive elements as well. So it's a big, massive disposal problem on the surface. But in terms of your overall picture, again, so this is Queensland in Australia, as we saw in the film, and again you get the same sort of landscape of pad going off into the distance, and then all the access roads and pipelines to connect it all together. I'll just very briefly mention this third technology, underground coal gasification. The idea with this is to target the coal itself rather than methane that's trapped in the coal. But obviously solid coal won't come up a well, so you've got to gasify the coal underground before you bring the gases to the surface. So the idea with this is to use similar drilling technology to shale gas or coal bed methane, but you drill down a pair of wells into your coal seam, connect them together somehow, and then you inject air or potentially pure oxygen into your coal seam, set it on fire, and then if you dial back the amount of air you're injecting, so you only partially burn the coal, then what you get coming up the other well to the surface is this so-called syngas, which is a mixture of carbon monoxide, and hydrogen and methane, which can then be used on the surface. But as you, I think, probably getting the idea, this is quite a almost really quite insane process, setting this coal on fire underground, and that has a load of impacts in terms of like gas. This gasification process produces a whole load of chemicals which that can then potentially contaminate the groundwater. In the around Great Britain, the government has sold off a load of licences already, just off the coast so far. So 24 licences, these black areas have been sold, basically right adjacent to the coast. And the idea is to like drill down and then horizontally under the sea, set fire to the coal under the sea. But there are also these 4 brown areas here which are applications for new licences, and one of those is slap bang in the middle of the Warwickshire countryside. So these companies are pushing to bring this licensing onshore as well, which is even more worrying. As you can see, there aren't any licences around Ireland at the moment, but that wasn't actually always the case. In fact, the first thing, and so far the only drilling that's actually been done for underground coal gasification, it was actually just off the coast of Ireland, at the Kish Banks, just off Dublin. So in 2009, a company called VP Power had this ship out there drilling 4 samples of coal out under the sea, up the Irish Sea near Dublin. It seems like they probably hit a load of financial problems after the credit crunch, because like shortly after they did this, they haven't been heard of since and potentially have gone bankrupt. Well, that's a bit unclear. But yeah, it is definitely, in terms of, that the sort of coal seams that are like, there's a lot of them, they go in Great Britain, but they do go right out under the Irish Sea. So, as far as Dublin, so that is, potentially an effect on Ireland as well. So I'll just talk a little bit about, why this is happening, because you'll hear a lot about, there's an energy crisis and we need, there's no choice, we have to do this sort of thing, but it's not quite that simple. This is human energy consumption over the last 200 years, and we're actually up here using more energy than we've ever used before. So it's not actually the case that we're going to just suddenly run out tomorrow. But what is changing quite fast at the moment is the amount of effort we're having to put in to actually extract these fossil fuels. So this is just 2 examples for coal and for oil. So if we look at coal, when we started using this, about 1,000 years ago, it was so-called sea coal, where you could go out on a beach with a basket and basically pick lumps of coal off the beach and take them home and burn them, which is obviously very low effort to get it. But once all the beaches were picked clean of this coal that's been washed off exposed coal seams under the sea, then you start having to do shallow tunnel mining and deeper tunnel mining. Now pretty much all the tunnel mines in the UK have been exhausted, even the open cast mines are going into decline. But this is the sort of, so far, the end point of that sort of growing effort. This is the largest open cast coal mine in Europe, in Western Germany, and these massive bucket wheel excavators are some of the largest machines in the world. And for oil has undergone a similar but somewhat accelerated process. So, 100 years ago in Texas, you could have 3 men with a little steam engine powered drill down 1,000 feet under the ground, and there could be oil fountaining into the air like this. You fast forward 100 years, and to try and get the same amount of oil, they're having to go out in 5,000 feet deep of water in the Gulf of Mexico with a $500 million oil platform, drill 13,000 feet down under the seabed to try and get similar amounts of oil. And then if anything goes wrong, it could go quite catastrophically wrong, like the BP Deepwater Horizon disaster. And you can actually see this even over just a few years in the financials of the big oil companies. So this is for Exxon here, Shell here, and Chevron here. And the orange is their capital expenditures, how much money they're putting in to try and get this stuff out of the ground. And the blue is their production. And for Exxon, then just over the last 4 years since 2009, they're now spending about 50% more to get pretty much the same amount of oil out of the ground. Shell is spending 40% more to get the same amount of oil out of the ground. Chevron is spending 90% more to get slightly less than they were a few years ago. So this is a very fast-changing thing where basically we're progressively using up the easy-to-get resort fossil fuels and just moving on to the harder and harder to get ones. And fracking is just the next step along that line if you just blindly follow this path too. This introduces this idea of this drilling treadmill where fracking is just the sort of personification of this. So you drill and frack a well, shale gas well say, and it will produce a fair bit of gas initially, but the decline rates on these unconventional wells are really quite steep. So maybe 70% or more in the first year, and then just keeps declining. So most of your gas is coming from the newest wells that you just drilled and fracked, and therefore you've got to keep drilling more and more wells in order to keep producing gas. So this is another reason why this whole process just spreads out across the landscape, because they've got to keep drilling more and more wells if they want to keep producing gas. So where's all this leading? Well, obviously part of it, the answer to that question is about what's actually under the ground here and around the UK. But that's not very well known. In fact, there aren't a great deal of estimates at all for Ireland at all. For the UK, the estimates are fairly rough, and especially for underground coal gasification. This is an industry number, and it's